As promised, we're going to make a tunic this week that's going to fit over your curves. Click the link below so you can download the PDF to follow along. You're going to have to take some measurements to get started for your tunic. First, you're going to take the length of your tunic. You're going to take it from the high point of shoulder, known as the HPS. You put it here, and the length that you want your tunic to be. Mine is going to be 25 inches, so you write that for A. Next, you're going to take the widest part of your body. Usually it's the hips. And you do it so that it's parallel to the floor. Take that measurement and you put it down, and then you add 5 inches and then you divide it by 4. So I have the download. All you have to do is click the link below and you'll see the download and you can fill in the blanks. Next, we're going to do the front shoulder width, which is from point to point, which is here. Next, you do the front shoulder slope. You have to take 2 measurements to get the front shoulder slope. First, you'll take from the edge of your shoulder, like if you're wearing a tailored top, you'll take it from the seam, from here to your natural waist. It's right here, usually right above your belly button. You take that measurement. Then you'll take the same measurement from your high point of shoulder from the same point. And then you'll subtract the difference. And that's your shoulder slope. Usually most people it's about 1.5 inches, but you have to do the measurement to see what yours is. Remember, it's all about how it fits in the shoulder, because if it doesn't fit in the shoulder, it's not going to look right on you. So the next one is, just a second, let me see what the next one is. The top shoulder, which is from here to here. This measurement. Then you're going to have to take your head, measure around your full head. I have a gele on, so this is not the real measurement, but just take your gele off or your kimar off and just measure your full length of your head. Then you take your bicep, which is here, which is the fullest part of your arm. And then you minus 4 inches and you put that measurement in. And then you want to do your sleeve length. The way you get your sleeve length is you go from your center front and you put your arm out and you measure where you want it to land. So here it's about 25 inches. So you put the 25 inches down, then you minus the front measurement. You have to do the math for B. After you do the B, you minus that measurement, and then you minus the cuff length, which is the cuff width, 1.25. So that's how you get your sleeve length. So just follow along on the download and it'll be fine. But if you have any questions, ask in the comments. So if you didn't download the PDF, download the PDF now, go back and rewatch this, and then you'll be able to follow along and you'll know what measurements I'm talking about, and you'll be able to fill in the blanks, because you'll need that to make the pattern, which we're going to do next. You will need about 5 feet of blue dot or craft paper 45 inches wide, some tape, a see-through ruler, a French curve, paper scissors, pencil or marker, measuring tape, and a yardstick or a long ruler. So you need to fold the paper so that you can make the front and back at the same time. Right now I'm drawing the center front line or the center back line for both. Make sure it's perpendicular to the blue dot paper or the craft paper that you have. Just fold it along that line, because that will be the center front or the center back. We'll cut it later, but right now we have to cut both sides, so this is the easiest way to do it. So now you measure how long you want the tunic. That's A. Now this is the B width, and this is how wide you want the tunic. Remember, it's the circumference plus 5 divided by 4. So whatever that measurement is for you, that's what you will make the width of the top. So you just square everything off. Make sure everything is at a right angle. and just trim the paper after that. Next, you measure the front shoulder width and measure down the shoulder slope. Then this is the top shoulder that you match to the top. Down 1.5, up 5.5 inches, which was my top shoulder. Then you measure at the edge 1/8 of an inch, and then you draw a line to the side seam. Next, you measure your head circumference divided by 2. Then you mark down 1.25 inches for the back neck drop, and you square off and use your French curve to make the curve, as shown here. Next, you measure down 3 inches for the front neck drop, and you do the same thing with the French curve. Next, you take the bicep measurement minus 4 inches, and you mark that, and you mark out 1 inch, and you square off the top shoulder and use the French curve to make the armhole. Then you attach the bottom hem to the armhole. Now I'm measuring around the armhole to see how wide the sleeve is. Here is 11.5 inches. And I'm marking, if you look on the shirt, there's a notch in the front and the side seam comes to the front. So I measured out 4 inches and I drew a line from the armhole to the hem. And I measured up 2.5 inches for the notch. And I squared it off at the hem. Then I wrote cut 1 on fold at center front. Now I'm adding 2 inches for the hem and adding seam allowance 1/2 inch around the armhole, 1/2 inch at the shoulder seam, and 1/4 inch around the neck so that it's not bulky when you sew. Now I'm just extending it so I know where to cut. Now when you're cutting this out, you have to cut both at the same time. So I'm cutting the back first. Now I'm cutting down the center front, center back to separate the front and the back. You want to label all your pattern pieces. This is the back. So it says cut 1 on fold. So if you want to keep it simple, you can leave the front and back like this. But if you want to follow the sketch with the notch, you cut along the line. Then you cut the notch at the bottom. And then you're going to add that piece to the back because the side seam is going to wrap around. So you just match the top and bottom and tape it. Just make sure the line is straight, which I did here. And then you tape both together, taping the front and the back so it doesn't move. Now you can just take some scraps, but make sure it's big enough to add the seam allowance for the side seam, which is 1/2 inch, like around the armhole. Just tape it down and measure out 1/2 inch. Once you finish that, you cut it out and you do the same thing for the front. Add 1/2 inch seam allowance and then cut it out. Now you cut the front neck. You trim that out. It's always good to label your pattern so you know which piece is which, and how many of what to cut out. So this is cut 1 of self on the fold. Self is just the body fabric that you would use. Now I'm measuring up 6 inches on the seam. so that I can match the notch when I do the sleeve. So you measure 6 inches up for front and back around the curve. So now we're working on the sleeve. I made the grain line, and we're going to do the same thing that we did for the front and the back. You're going to cut the front and the back of the sleeve. That's why we put it on the fold. Now we need the sleeve length, which is the sleeve length that you took minus B minus 1 1/4, which is the cuff. And you mark that on the fold. Now you're marking the width of the sleeve, which is the measurement that you took around the armhole plus 2.5 inches fullness. Then you square everything off. Now you mark down 1 inch from the top, 6 inches in. Then you measure 3 from the fold, and you use your French curve to ease both lines. Now I'm measuring 6 inches that I measured on the sleeve for the notch, so that I can match that up when I attach the sleeve to the armhole. I measured in 1 inch at the bottom and just mark a line. Now I'm adding a 1/2 inch seam allowance around the whole sleeve, and because there's a cuff at the bottom, we're going to add a 1/2 inch at the bottom as well. Now you cut everything out. Now you have to mark the notch and the grain line and label your pattern. Now we're going to make the cuff, which is an inch and a quarter wide. So you double that, which is 2.5 inches plus seam allowance, plus the width of the cuff, or the length of the cuff rather. So you just take a measurement around where the cuff will land on your arm, and that is the width of the cuff, plus a 1/2 inch on each side. So it's a rectangle. Just make sure you add the 1/2 inch seam allowance. You'll cut 2 of these. And you trim this out as well. Now I'm doing the front facing. Which is going to be 1 inch and a quarter or 1.5 inches wide. So you just measure 1.5 inches around, and then you have your front facing. And you're going to do the same thing for the back. Right now I'm just marking where the seam allowance is. Then you mark your pattern so you know how much to cut. So you have to cut one of the self, which is the body fabric, and one of the fusing or the interfacing to give it body so it won't stretch out. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the back. It's basically just tracing the neck and then making everything 1.5 inches. You cut it out, and then you mark the piece so you know what to cut and how many. So you should have all 6 pattern pieces: the front, the back, the sleeve, the front and back facing, and the cuff. So if you have any questions, ask in the comments and click the link below for all of the downloads. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next week where we're going to sew up the tunic. Assalamu alaikum.